senior and a junior one. The one suffered more about seeing the other's son being shown respect than about the death of her own. When the senior wife saw the junior wife's son being decked out and shown respect, she cried bitterly. When asked what was the use of crying about her dead son, she answered that she was not crying about him, but about the junior wife's living one. Sometime later, the junior wife's son fell ill and was taken to another village. After a few days, when the senior wife was near that village, she saw a dead body being carried out. She thought the junior wife's son had died and felt very happy.
Assertion: although pleasure is hard to find, it does no harm, but since pain harms, it is as if alien to the body. Answer: pleasurable sensations are not natural to the body, for with the passing of time from childhood to youth, maturity, and old age, suffering such as that of aging increases and pleasure vanishes. Therefore pleasure seems as alien to this body as a visitor who only stays for one day. It is like a traveler on a long journey whose suffering increases as he grows tired and runs out of provisions. Assertion: although the body's nature is suffering, causes of pleasure act as a remedy. Therefore one need not feel aversion. Answer: that is incorrect. There appear to be many causes of physical suffering, internal causes such as sickness, as well as many external ones. But humans do not seem to have as many causes for pleasure. Since suffering occurs constantly, one ought to feel aversion. It is like a certain man who wanted a king's daughter as his wife and because of that got involved in a lot of suffering.
Assertion: if pleasure did not exist, it could not intensify, but since it is seen to intensify, real pleasure does exist. Answer: that is not so. Through the intensification of pleasure, its opposite, pain, is seen to occur, but through the intensification of pain, there will not likewise finally be just pleasure, its opposite. As pain intensifies, body and mind experience agony. It is like King Mandhatra who fell because he wanted Indra's half of the throne and was not content to share power with him. When one overindulges in the causes of pleasure such as food and so forth, the opposite of pleasure, just pain, is seen to occur together with the conditions for pleasure. But when one has prolonged contact with the causes of pain, together with these conditions for pain, there is no change to pleasure, its opposite. It is like King Aoka's prison called the pleasant abode, where one could first choose one's favorite form of behavior, but since no other could then be adopted, this eventually became painful.
Assertion: since the expression devdatta has pleasure is used, pleasure does exist. Answer: composite things by nature disintegrate moment by moment. Furthermore, this is true with regard to the three times. When you have therefore already spent, are spending and will spend time disintegrating and dying, it is not at all proper to call the process of dying pleasurable. It is like the following analogy: a householder accused a bad servant who kept spoiling his things of ingratitude. The servant replied, "You wasted your actions trusting me." Similarly, childish people think of the process of dying as pleasurable, and of themselves as happy, though they have been dying from the time they were a fetus. Furthermore, it is inappropriate to think of suffering as pleasure, for beings with bodies are constantly subject to different kinds of affliction such as hunger, thirst, and so forth. It is therefore not at all proper to call being afflicted by the causes of suffering pleasurable.
It is like a new wife who wanted to have control of the household, and when she did, though it gave her trouble, thought of it as happiness. Pleasure and pain depend on the body, which depends on the elements. Each of the four elements on its own is powerless to produce the body, which is produced through the combining of the elements. During the development of the fetus, the earth element stabilizes the other three, preventing abortion. Thus the earth element holds the fetus. The water element binds, creating solidity, otherwise the particles would disperse like sand. The fire element prevents decomposition of the fetus, while the wind element enables growth and development to take place. However, the elements harm each other. The earth element inhibits the movement of wind. Wind disperses the others, and fire, which water harms, bums earth and dries up water. It is thus not at all proper to call a collection of incompatible and conflicting factors pleasurable. It is like the following analogy: there can be no pleasure when a horse, jackal, snake, bird, deer, and child-eating crocodile are confined together. When beings with bodies never have effective means to do away with cold, heat and so forth, it is not at all proper to call being destroyed by harmful agents pleasurable. A band of thieves harried with nooses and sticks will find no comfort, wherever they turn for protection. Similarly, when ordinary people harassed by suffering turn to its antidotes, they still do not have pleasure.
Assertion, since conventionally one uses the expression devdutta is lying down comfortably, real pleasure does exist. Answer, when on earth there are no activities lying down, walking, sitting and so forth done without mental and physical exertion, it is not at all proper to call performing tiring actions pleasurable. When one is weak and incapable of effort, even raising one's arm requires someone else's assistance. When one is strong, however, one does not notice the suffering involved in lying down or in extending and flexing one's limbs. Daily one performs many actions to ensure the body's survival, they are not performed for pleasure. It is like the following analogy: a prince with 5 tutors for different subjects such as grammar is always miserable, because when one releases him another one catches him. Similarly, common beings who perform actions associated with the 5 aggregates, which are like thieves and executioners, are always miserable.
Assertion, if there were no pleasure, it would not be feasible to experience suffering for the sake of pleasure, but since suffering for pleasure's sake is seen, pleasure does exist. Answer, the unwise do ill deeds for the sake of a little pleasure, and as a result experience such sufferings as being put to death in this life and bad rebirths later. Since the wise want happiness, they should always, in this and other lives, guard against suffering caused by ill deeds. When there are bad rebirths resulting from actions done by the unwise for the sake of pleasure, calling them pleasurable is not at all proper. One should guard against ill deeds just as one guards against an unknown enemy who is a constant source of fear.
Assertion, one sees that those intent on pleasure ride horses and elephants, considering it a discomfort to walk on their own 2 feet. Therefore, pleasure does exist. Answer, on examining accepted causes of pleasure one finds that, right from the start, slight discomfort is beginning. For humans there is never, even at the outset, pleasure in riding, eating or drinking. If done in excess they only become painful. How could something which at the start was not a beginning of pain in the end increase and become intense pain? That which from the start was a small incipient cause of pain is mistaken for pleasure. It is like a fool who thinks the last half ladle of his parents' fried bread will satisfy his hunger. Assertion, pleasure caused by the alleviation of pain exists. Answer, when a rich man, vomiting into a gold pot, sees his servant vomit into a clay one, though vomiting is equally unpleasant for both, he thinks how prosperous he is. Like the rich man who feels